How's it going? My name is Josh. I'm the owner of Dabble Extracts. I'm a Colorado Springs native. I was actually born on Fort Carson, military brat. Moved around a lot. About 2008, I started kind of getting into the weed industry as it was legalizing, and I started Cold Baked, which would become Dabble Extracts in 2012. We branded and started Dabble in 2012. So, yeah, here I am. How's it going?
Excited to have you here.
Awesome.
You came out in the rain.
Yeah, I did.
You came out in the rain. So, how has Dabble evolved over the years?
It's a hell of a story, right? I started in the cannabis industry pretty early on, kind of backpack days, as a lot of us referred to it, right? We were all caregivers. There was semi-licensing. I had a few endeavors. It became part of a dispensary for a little while there, because once rules started to come around, a lot of us jumped into these shotgun marriages, right, where we all needed to scramble. I'd have grow equipment and be a good grower. These guys would have a store. These guys had a commercial grow facility. We all kind of merged together. And whenever you scramble to create a relationship like that, it's hard to put a foundation under you, right? So, that didn't end up working. I actually left the industry for a little while, kind of worked in the insurance world, and then I got into a pretty severe accident in 2012 that kind of changed my life, right? And
What kind of accident?
it was a motor vehicle accident. I was a passenger in a Jeep, and my buddy had fallen asleep at the wheel, and so we ended up rolling. And so my legs were on the dash when I was asleep, and so when the airbag deployed, it collapsed me like an accordion, kind of backwards. And so I shredded all the ligaments in both my knees. I broke my arm. I broke my jaw. I fractured my leg. I partially severed one of my toes. And that, it was pretty life-changing. I spent almost a year in physical therapy. It took me like probably 4 or 5 months just before I was even standing again. I went through about 6 surgeries and 4 other operations. And it just kind of made me realize that life's too short. By the time I had recovered, I knew that my passion was in cannabis, and that this was the last place I felt kind of satisfied with helping people and really making a difference in the world, right? And so I worked my office job. I went through recovery, and and I'm thank God that I had that at the time. But it did. Once I got back, I ended up with like $470,000 in medical bills, and I got an insurance settlement that was just barely like $30,000 more than what I owed in bills. But I used that. I turned around, I paid off my college debt, and I used the rest to start a business and a 900 square foot Mexican restaurant, right? The original vision was to, make sauces, because I wanted to have like almost like a Subway type style where I infuse sauces and people would come in and get sandwiches. And, rec was on the ballot, but it hadn't passed yet. We were all still medical at the time. And I envisioned it eventually being rec in a way that you could come in, we could do deli style, serve yourself, or self-serve, or even we serve you and dose you, but that all changed when regs dropped and everything started coming out. So originally I started canning my sauces. So I had a whole suite. I had like a basil pesto, I had a tomato aioli, I had all these infused sauces. It was 50 milligrams per tablespoon. And then it made it to where I had to sell out of a retail store. I wasn't going to be able to do on-site sales. Once all the rules kind of hashed out on how rec was going to look, it just completely changed the dynamic, right? And so pretty quickly I pivoted. I started doing canned sauces instead. Really only 3 of the sauces survived the canning process in a way that I was still, proud of them. And so I had a queso, a green chili, and a barbecue sauce. And we were actually featured in a High Times documentary in like 2014, I think. So it was pretty cool, because we were one of the most creative entries into High Times back when they used to still do their competitions out here before they left, right? As I'm selling these edibles, we're getting some pretty good traction in Denver. Everybody's asking me about concentrates. Everybody's asking if we're making dabs, and that was a whole new scene. People had just started blowing dab rigs. About 2012, 2014, right? That's when, the glass, I think the glass is really what brought out the use of concentrate. Because, we had CO2 earwax, we had all the stuff in syringes, but no one was really making hydrocarbon concentrates, right? And the few people that were, they were open blasting. So I don't know if you remember that, but it was I mean, it was the leading cause of apartment fires in the state of Colorado for like a year and a half, right? Because what these people would do is they would take a turkey baster and then they would just shove it full of weed, and then they would take a butane drip line and pour it in the top, and then it would all just melt the trichromes and the terpenes, and it would all just puddle with the gas inside of a Pyrex. And a lot of guys would do this on the stove to evaporate the gas as they were doing it, and everybody was blowing up, man. It was crazy, right? And so so everybody's asking me for concentrates, and I'm just making edibles at the time, and it just got to a point that it's like I'm trying to hustle these edibles, but everybody wants concentrates. And so I started looking into it, and there were really only a couple of competitors on the market at the time. Top Shelf Extracts, which I don't even think they exist anymore. There was another one called Terpex, I think, and I can't remember if Terpex started before me or right at the same time as me making concentrates, but and then a few other, Mahatma, I don't even think they exist anymore either, right? Those were really the only, companies making concentrates, because they were just taking really big glass turkey basters and flooding it with commercial grade butane outside, right? So they were being a little bit smarter about it, but it still wasn't the safest procedure, So or I'm making edibles in a 900 square foot restaurant, and I have a big back patio, and I was like, well, maybe I can make concentrates. And so I went to a buddy of mine and asked him to show me how to open blast, and he did, in his house, in his very street days, still kind of cross caregiver, Licensing was, this is 2012. Rec was just coming online, for the rest of the state. Unfortunately, I started here in Colorado Springs, and they had banned recreational sales, so I was really just kind of stuck medical for several years. But at the time, like I said, 900 square foot restaurant, with the little bit of money I had left from the settlement, and I started open blasting with my buddy just to learn it, and I was like, man, there's no way I will ever feel comfortable leaving someone to do this by themselves, right? Like there's got to be a better way. I'm not gonna let somebody just blow up everything. So I did. I started looking online, for what were called closed loop extractors at the time, and it wasn't even mandated. The state and nobody really knew what we were even doing, And so I found two companies that were making, actually three that were making closed loop extractors at the time, which is an extractor that recovers the gas using a pump, or some of them use air-driven pumps, others use electric. No one was using electric at the time because they hadn't figured it out yet, but there were air-driven pumps, and there was one small electric pump, and some use passive recovery, right? But they would recover the butane or the propane that you were extracting with back into the tank, so that when you pulled it, it only had a little bit of gas left in it, not something that is literally like fuming off, right? And so I did. I found Emotech, which was Giddy Up, and then I found Matt Ellis up at ETS in Denver, and they were the only two with certified machines at the time. That I was like, when regulators catch wind of what we're doing, this is what we're gonna need, And so I bought the ETS. I think it was the 1200 at the time. I think it's the 1300 now, but it's their smallest setup, right? And I spent the last little bit of cash I had to get this, $18,000 extractor. And I remember calling Regional Building and being like, hey guys, I just bought this extractor. Do I need any kind of permits or anything? Do you need to do anything? And they had no idea what it was. I remember I spoke to one of the engineers, and he was, because the front desk lady was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. They transferred me to an engineer. The engineer was like, well, do you plug it in? And I was like, I plug in the pump. And they were like, okay, well, do you have to install it? And I was like, no, it's on a stand. Like, you're good then. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, you're good. I was like, do you mind sending me that in an email? And he did. He sent me an email. Said I was good to go. No C1D1, no C1D2, no nothing, because they had no idea what it was, right? And so it was so early in the game. And by this point, we're at like 2013 going into 2014, and so I did. I plugged my extractor in this little Mexican restaurant. I installed a vent fan. I started closed loop extraction, and I did that there for, about a year or two until regulations started to catch up and people like hazmat and everything started to really realize what we were doing. Then I started building my second lab, which was off South Academy, so here in the Springs as well, because at this point, we were on a lot of councils, and we were trying to, growing Springs movement and all these, proactive movements that were trying to get the regulations changed to allow us to do recreational sales here. And so, that was, and we did, we developed in that process, since I started with the closed loop before a lot of the competition. I started using that closed loop extractor almost 9 months before they actually mandated closed loop extractors through the state, right? The state was the first to mandate it because, again, so many people were starting fires and blowing up. Fire and hazmat caught wind of it pretty damn quick, right? And so once people started blowing themselves up, they mandated closed loop extractors. And that was really when, we had our first big break, right? So we were doing it for about 9 months. We had figured out a process. I actually applied for patents on our process. We have a patented process for both our shatter and our wax extraction because we do inline recovery and then we manipulate afterwards, right? And so it's a lot different. And we also, one of our biggest points is our 0 ppm. So there is 0 residual solvent in any of our dabbables that you'll buy off of the shelf, right? And so 800 ppm is the state limit, right? If you go over 800, you have to rework it. But we make sure that all of our products test at 0, right? So, and that was a big stick of mine when I first started making it, because people were putting out such low quality product back then, right? It was literally like poop soup on most of these shelves, right? It was, you'd walk in and see black concentrate in jars, and you'd open it and still be bubbling a little bit. Like it was just, it wasn't good quality product, right? And so, we got a lot of people were hating on us pretty hard because once they mandated closed loop, we were one of the only people making good quality concentrates in town. And so we spread through the dispensaries like wildfire. We started growing really fast, right? And so that was a good break. And eventually people did catch up. Now I've really got some competitors that make some quality product. But, the only thing that, looking back, I wish is we would have had recreational at the time, because then we wouldn't have been limited, right? Because we spread through the Springs and Front Range medically insanely fast when that happened, but we couldn't sell to any of the rec stores, right? And so it kind of capped that growth spurt. But overall, that was a huge defining time for us. And then we built the second lab, which did have, the C1D2, which was the reg at the time. So explosion-proof walls, ventilation, whole 9 yards. But it was that growth and that, just that trial and error that allowed me to do that at that time. Around that time too, a couple years later, we started moving kind of into the distillate, making distillate pens, expanding, but our shatter wax, doing more live resins, right? Started playing with diamonds and crystal tech, and kind of expanding the live resin aspect of our offerings. And then about 2018, I ended up, 2016, I really wanted to go rec. We had that explosion. We'd had an increase in revenue, so I started building a recreational lab down in Pueblo, which, it was a little bit smaller than my Springs lab. My Springs lab had a kitchen, though, because eventually I wanted to go back into edibles. Just never really got the opportunity. And concentrates were just growing so fast, we were just trying to keep up with orders, So, so we did. We never made it back to that, but then we started the Pueblo lab, and we were kind of running both labs for a really long time, and it was just, twice the resources for literally what we could produce in the Pueblo lab. So around 2018, I kind of made the decision that we're going to close the Springs lab. So we sold the Springs lab. That actually became Turpman and Rosin, which is associated to one of the stores here in town. And then we completely just moved down to Pueblo. And, a lot of my staff came with, but that was a hard move. That was a hard thing to do, to make that call, because I had really good people here, and commuting to Pueblo is a pain. It's a lot. So not everybody wanted to do that, but I had to make the call. It was in the business best interest, and so we moved down to Pueblo, and we've been doing really good down there. So we've continued to grow. We've got a lot more capacity down there because I built that lab later. So it had a little bit more in its infrastructure, larger electrical capacities. Just cooler stuff that's allowed us to keep up with technology as it's changed. So, but yeah, and that kind of brings us to current, so yeah, we just keep trying to move forward,
What's the name of the game? What sets you apart from everyone else?
So yeah, the 0 ppm residual solvent is one of the massive things. The other thing is and I think every company can speak for this, is just an eye for quality, right? It's we've been around so long, and we've had I've had changes in managers or changes in extractors, and really it's just the amount that the person who's working, even just the front line, whether you're growing weed, whether you're extracting weed, if you get somebody in there that doesn't care, it can really affect your quality, right? And so over the last few years, we've made a huge effort to get in there, restore our process, revitalize some of our processes to what they originally were, to make sure that we have that eye and that nose for quality, right? And I'd love to say that our products have been top notch, unbeatable the entire time, but we've gone through ebbs and flows. We've had different people in the lab, we've had different changes happen, but now I'd say that we've gotten to a point that I'm really very proud of our products right now. We're releasing high grade dabbables, that I'm happy to be dabbing, and I love them. And honestly, I think we're back on top of our game, which we've had moments where, in 11 years, you're not always going to be on top of everything the way you need to, but I can say that right now we definitely are. And it's almost like a comeback tour for me, because, we're rebuilding a lot of relationships with people that, unfortunately I didn't even know we'd lost, just because, when you have managers in place and things, you don't have your hands on everything. I've changed that, I'm back in it every day now, and I've definitely seen the quality improve, and I've seen the feedback from our consumers improve too. So
how do you ensure consistency in all products?
So really, this is something that we've learned to do through time, right? Because it's one thing that does set us apart, and also it's an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time, is we don't actually have our own grow, right? So my original thought on that was that I can source from the best of the best, and I don't have to worry about trying to make something into something that I want it to be, right? If it's not where it needs to be, I can send it back, so I can actually pick what I want and what I want in each of our products. And don't get me wrong, everybody's indoor, outdoor, there's all the arguments, and I'd say every product has its benefits and its drawbacks, right? And really, I've seen some phenomenal growers, and when you have phenomenal growers growing the best weed they can, I can extract the best product that I want, right? And so that's the strength of it. The downfall of not having a grow is some of these guys with grows can control their genetics pretty closely, right? They can make sure that they've got strains no one else has, or they can breed a strain that no one else has, right? So, it's got its pluses and its negatives, but overall, I can source, and I can make sure that the source material going into our finished products is where I want it to be. And then also we've really dialed in kind of our extraction process. So we have several kind of kill points where, the flower might look phenomenal, it might smell good, but then we run it, and there's something in it. It has some growers were using sulfur for a really long time, just as an example, right? And so then all of a sudden, we catch a weird smell when it's extracted. So then we have a QC process where after the extractor can then say, okay, this isn't going to meet our dabbable quality. He can ship it off to distillate, which in the distillate process is just so much further refined that we're really just bringing it down to, just THC and cannabinoids, so there's nothing else left in it, right? But, in a dabbable, you get a weird sulfur taste. It's going to ruin the dab, and so there was a while there where we were so busy and we had so many people working. At one point in time, we were growing so fast. I had 3 extractors working almost 24/7, right? And they had their assists, and it was just to keep up because our equipment was small. We were just trying to stay alive and make orders, right? And so, and now we've got bigger equipment. We can take our time. We can get through things the way we need to. Versus when you're just trying to get stuff out, you don't get to try everything, and you don't get to see everything the way you want to. In fact, when you're trying to crank out, 35, 40 batches a day, how can anybody get that much weed tried and sampled and tested, So we've really kind of changed that. We've got larger equipment now, so we can run much larger batches, which also takes pressure off the back end. So we still have the product to fulfill the orders. We can make sure that what we are making in big batches is coming out a lot better, right? And so we can play with the profiles a lot more. We can experiment, and if the extractor doesn't like it, then it goes, if they do like it, it'll go to purge. But then if purge is working it, and cleaning it or manipulating it into the waxes or the butters or the sugars, then at that point, they can make the determination too. And then at that point too, we can send it for testing, analytical testing to get the potencies. And now we have sample managers, right? So we can send it all out to our sample managers. Sample managers can actually dab and try it, make sure that it hits our quality standards, and then we get it out, right? And even then, we still have a few squeak through, but we've been able to dial in the growers that we're working with, consistently, making sure that they're using products that we're okay with, right? Versus when we were just trying to turn product, it was really hard to keep up, right? And it's really hard to just sample that much product. So we've got a lot better pulse on. And if we try something at any point in the QC, or even we send it out to a store and they say they got a review, we'll immediately pull it, try it, verify it. And if anything, like I said, it's normally just something weird, like a weird terpene, or sometimes if you let your plants burn and you don't flush them right, like we can get some weird salts that will add weird flavors to them. But for the most part, all of our stuff is fully tested 100%, so we never really have that issue. But it's the quality. To finish up your question, we have several QC points all throughout our process that make sure, from extraction, even before extraction, to finished and final packaging, and even after that when our product's on the shelf, we're following up with it, making sure people like it as much as we do.
So how often are you bringing in new products?
So I think that's kind of a twofold question. So new strains we play with all the time, right? So I love new strains. I love getting my hands on new genetics. I love working with some of these boutique growers that have really good or have developed their own genetics. I'll do collabs with guys like that all the time. Like new products, we've got a few ideas in the works right now. But it's really hard in this industry to create a brand new product, right? Like, I can see products that are implementing in other places but some of them are really gimmicky. Others, it's like, why would somebody buy that other than the gimmick of it? But then others, I remember when crystallization in diamonds first came around, everybody loved it. And I wasn't the biggest fan of just the straight crystalline, but once you start playing with the terpene profiles and kind of getting those really nice, crystalline sugars, those are delicious, so those have become one of my favorites, but I'm still just not a huge fan of just the big THC rocks, because I don't get the flavor. I don't get the entourage effect of the terpenes. You know what I'm saying? It has to be some nice diamonds in sauce for it to be, my thing, right? But so we do. So I really love that. But when that first came around, you kind of got to gauge it. And some of this stuff is so fad that it comes in and out so fast. But if I try something and I like it, we're gonna start making it. So. And when we're developing too, definitely it's gonna keep going, so.
Understood. So I see that Dabble is an award-winning concentrate brand.
Mm-hmm.
The awards you won, what is your favorite?
We've entered in multiple competitions and won a ton of awards, and we're really grateful for that, right? We, throughout time, I've had a lot of good staff members that have really cared about what we're doing, and even to this day, I still do, right? It's, and so I think when it comes to winning the awards, it's always funny, because the years I am, second guessing myself, or I don't feel confident, we end up taking first, second, third, just clearing house. But then the years, it's like I come with what I feel like is just the fire, the fire, and I'm like, I know we're gonna win. We end up taking third place, and I'm just disappointed in myself, So I've learned to just try and be humble. And I'd say one of the most exciting things, or I think the most exciting one, was by far first year winning competitions, right? Because that was, I think it was 2014 or 2015, so it was right when we were experiencing, that big uptick. We were super busy. We were working with lots of great growers, and I had, collabed with a couple of them, and I had never won a competition before. So I honestly, knowing that I had over 100 and something competitors in this competition, I gave myself no hope. I was like, there's no way in hell we're going to win, right? But sure as shit, we cleaned. We got first place, And so it was so exciting and so ecstatic. And to this day, I still have the picture that they took of us, framed in my office. And so that was probably one of the most exciting. And it was just because I completely felt like the underdog. I didn't come in with a ton of money. We had built our way up completely. and to then take home a first place trophy, it felt amazing, you know. So that was the most exciting. But competition's always exciting. I love it. And nowadays too, I love seeing, you know, kind of the people come out that have still been coming out for years. You know, our industry has had ups and downs, and you know, we've experienced cullings a lot, right? And so, you know, to just still see some of the faces that have been doing this as long as I have, or almost as long as I have, it's really good to see that people are pushing it out.
Yeah, speaking of, like you said, things are always changing. So how do you stay current with the trends and everything that's on consumer preferences on concentrates?
You know, that's hard for us, right? Because we don't get to be in the retail position as often as we'd like. You know, we'll do vendor pop-ups and we get to see clients sometimes. I personally try and go to events, and I try and engage with, so we get the B2B interaction a lot, right? Which is just the business to business. We don't get the B2C or business to customer as much. So I mean, we pay a lot of attention to our social media and, you know, some of the feedback that people give us on there. So, I mean, if you want to read it, please believe I'm reading almost everything that goes through there. I might not be the one that responded to you, but I'm definitely reading all of their comments, and I'm reading all of their messages. And I really appreciate that feedback. When people are honest and they give us good feedback, it's truly helpful, because we got to listen to the people that are consuming our products and loving our stuff. You know what I'm saying? So that would be my number one. And then I try and keep my ear to the ground with dispensaries. You know, I try and listen to bud tenders and their feedback, and you know what they'd like to see change. You know, we've changed our packaging, I mean, completely over the last few years, just completely based off of our bud tender feedback, right? What worked for them, what didn't work for them, what was easy to use, what wasn't. And so, and we're still evolving, you know, like I'm about to change our labels, you know, we're about to swap those out on the jars, because I'm still kind of fed up with those. But I mean, overall, it's always moving forward, and it's always pivoting. You know, you can't get stuck in your ways, and that's what'll kill you, right? So I try and listen to feedback. I try and be receptive, and, you know, not take it personally, right? That's the hardest thing, is when you've created a baby and someone says your baby's ugly, it's hard not to feel a kind of way, right? So, but you got to be receptive, and you got to move forward. So,
your brands are in medical stores. So, what is like the benefits of using concentrates over prescription drugs?
Oh, there's massive benefits when it comes to prescription drugs specifically. Actually, I mean, kind of to what I told you earlier, you know, the whole reason I made sure that we had 0 ppm residual solvent was, I started looking, because again, I was really, you know, in 2012, I was really hesitant about using hydrocarbons for extraction, right? But everything I'm reading in all the pharmaceutical studies where they're using hydrocarbons for extraction of other plant-based, you know, alkaloids, you've got all this data that, you know, they even have, and that's where the 800 ppm residual solvent level came from. I'm pretty sure it's from pharmaceuticals, but those are ingestibles, right? Most pharmaceutical drugs are ingestibles. But the butane, and just to focus on that, right? Butane is actually, it breaks down fatty matter, right? And so they've done studies, so people used to huff butane, like they'd huff spray paint to get high, and it deteriorates brain cells. And so, I mean, granted, 800 ppm is such a small level that I can't say that's going to happen off of, you know, dabbing a slurry of butane, right? But I never wanted to risk it. I wanted to make sure that we were creating the most health conscious product that we could when we were putting it out there, right? And especially since we were launching medically, right? I wanted to make sure that the cancer patient that needed the higher doses of the cannabinoids was able to get them in a way that wasn't going to compromise their immune system, right? In any way, you know, any way that I could contribute to, right? And so, you know, making sure, you know, a lot of our microbe studies that we did to make sure that we had no microbes in our products, you know, we were doing that years before the state was even pushing to do it. But kind of to, you know, relate to what you had said about pharmaceuticals. You know, pharmaceuticals are heavily addictive. And as I'd mentioned, I was in an accident. I ended up with a pretty severe dependence on opioids for a while, right? And it was, you know, getting clean of that, using cannabis, and then even moving into concentrates and dabbing, that, really just allowed me to kick that to the curb completely, right? I was on 200 milligrams of oxys and Percocets a day at one point in my life, and that is a massive amount, right? And so, and it was all prescribed, it was all pharmaceuticals. And so, you know, cannabis really helped me get clean of that, still manage my pain in a way, and specifically in concentrate form, it allows you to get a high enough dose quick enough, and the onset is so much faster, right? You do edibles, you're waiting, even with the quicks, you're waiting 20 to 30 minutes, you know. Average edible for me is 45 minutes to an hour, which, I mean, if my knees are hurting and I'm in a lot of pain, I don't want to wait 45 minutes for relief, right? But I mean, I could grab the Puffco, or I could grab the dab rig, and I could throw a Dabble on, and it's immediate, and it's a lot more potent than if I'm smoking a joint, and I don't have to inhale all of the carcinogens that are going to be in a paper or even in plant material. And that's the beauty of concentrate over even flower, right? You've removed all of the carcinogens that are burning, all the plant materials, all of the carbon that's going to be there. You've really just brought it down, or a lot of the carbon that's in it, you brought it down to primarily just the terpenes and the cannabinoids, right? And if you've done it correctly in a hydrocarbon process, you can do it in a way that's like almost evaporated sea salt. So all of its bonds and connections are still together, right? So I don't know if you know that, but when you evaporate, salt water into sea salt, the reason they say it's better too is because the sodium chloride is still bonded to like the magnesiums, the zincs, and so your body can interface with it a lot better because it's in a more natural form. It hasn't broken all of the different molecules apart, right? I was on 200 milligrams of oxys and Percocets a day at one point in my life, and that is a massive amount, right? And it was all prescribed. It was all pharmaceuticals, and so cannabis really helped me get clean of that, still manage my pain in a way, and specifically in concentrate form, it allows you to get a high enough dose quick enough, and the onset is so much faster, right? You do edibles, you're waiting, even with the quicks, you're waiting 20 to 30 minutes, Average edible for me is 45 minutes to an hour, which, I mean, if my knees are hurting and I'm in a lot of pain, I don't want to wait 45 minutes for relief, right? But I mean, I could grab the Puffco, or I could grab the dab rig, and I could throw a Dabble on, and it's immediate, and it's a lot more potent than if I'm smoking a joint, and I don't have to inhale all of the carcinogens that are going to be in a paper or even in plant material. And that's the beauty of concentrate over even flower, right? You've removed all of the carcinogens that are burning, all the plant materials, all of the carbon that's going to be there. You've really just brought it down, or a lot of the carbon that's in it, you brought it down to primarily just the terpenes and the cannabinoids, right? And if you've done it correctly in a hydrocarbon process, you can do it in a way that's like almost evaporated sea salt. So all of its bonds and connections are still together, right? So I don't know if you know that, but when you evaporate, salt water into sea salt, the reason they say it's better too is because the sodium chloride is still bonded to like the magnesiums, the zincs, and so your body can interface with it a lot better because it's in a more natural form. It hasn't broken all of the different molecules apart. And so it's the same premise with the hydrocarbon. If you're careful with your purge process and you do a slow, cool purge, you can keep a lot of those intact, and you can maintain a lot of those additional benefits. So.
That's amazing. So, are you into any community initiative programs out here?
Yeah, I'm from here. Like I said, I'm a Colorado Springs native. I moved around a lot, but I always came back. And so I feel a close connection with the state, with the city specifically. So, we work with Black Pegasus. He's a local promoter and hip hop artist. Him and his company, Mount Olympus Records, we do a toy drive with them every year. We also do a turkey drive. We've worked on the turkey drives with Buku Loud in the past too, which was really cool. One thing we haven't done in a while that I really want to do is a Clean the Springs Day, right? So we used to give coupons to people to come out and help us pick up trash. We haven't done that in a little while, honestly, since COVID. COVID kind of killed that initiative for us because people just weren't coming out for a while, right? And I think COVID killed a lot of things. And so we haven't, once that momentum dies, it's really hard to build it again. And so, because I remember the first year we did it, we had like 2 people come out, but then the second year, those same 2 people brought 4 more, and by the end, I think we had 20 or 30 people coming out. And so, but everything you do has to be consistent. You have to build that momentum. And unfortunately, COVID killed a lot of those, but we're still doing the turkey drive. We're still doing the toy drive for Christmas. And those are something I'm really proud to do all the time. And, honestly, we're open to initiatives too. So if you guys have something in mind or something you're working on, I'd love to work with you or collab with it. So.
Most definitely keep that in mind. But last but not least, man, how do you envision the future of concentrates right now, and how do you see Dabble in it?
I think there's a promising future for concentrates, right? I really do. I think that as states are evolving and as things start to adapt, we've been doing it so long. We have a lot of experience, and so I think Dabble will always have a place in the concentrate market. I think right now a big threat for the legal cannabis industry is just the de facto hemp industry, right? And so I think once the government kind of figures out what they're going to do with that, the selling of edibles to kids in gas stations in New Mexico and Texas. I'm not sure if you're familiar with all of what's happening there, but basically, it's just a huge loophole that's allowing them to sell cannabinoid products to, even minors online, right? And so once they figure out how to close that, I think it will cause, a resurgence in legal cannabis. And I think then the legal tax cannabis will have a chance to proliferate again and actually get to a point that, I'd like to see us nationwide, because the one good thing about the hemp movement is they've created a demand for THC products where there wasn't one before in places like Texas, even in a lot of Bible Belt states, right? Because now they are saying it's legal, right? And so, but it won't truly be legal until it's regulated cannabis, and so I think that's going to be a really big defining point is when they figure that out. But for now, we're going to keep moving forward. I've got a few projects on the books that you guys should look out for. Hopefully here within the next year we'll be releasing. So I think those will be pretty innovative. We actually just did a collab with GC Concentrates and launched our infused joint line. So that's a really good one that just hit the market that you guys should check out if you haven't yet. And then keep an eye on us, because we're definitely not sleeping on ourselves. So.
And then while you're here, man, any shout outs you want to give out?
I want to give a shout to you guys here at 24K. I appreciate you guys having me on. I also just want to give a shout out to all the staff at Dabble and to my family. You guys know I love you all. So.
Yeah, look, while he's here, he has that Stevie Stone shirt. Make sure you get one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And actually, this is an awesome collab we did with Stevie Stone, Odyssey Records, limited edition. So you guys got to get your hands on them soon if you're going to. So.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time. That was all we have for today. And until the next episode.
Awesome. It was a pleasure, man. Thank you.